Episode 4 is definitely the most entertaining that we've had. That's for damn sure. And also, along with that, it's got some good manuscript pages too. Probably some of the best that I've seen up to now. Some good stories, some good information, stuff like that. I think we missed about 6, maybe 7.
Zane could feel the poems taking form, shaping things. As he experimented, he imagined he could almost feel the power surging through the keys of the typewriter. It exhilarated him. But there was fear, too. If not for his young assistant Emil, he would have given it up. But Emil convinced him otherwise. He, too, had a way with words. Hartman kept talking, giving Barry the grand tour, clearly proud of the place. He went on and on about his hunting trophies, and Barry was impressed. But he was here on business. He raised his voice, cut through the monologue. "Hey, Hartman, where's Al?" Hartman stopped in mid-sentence, annoyed at the interruption. He nodded at the hulking orderly standing nearby. The man smiled and clapped a practiced hand on Barry's shoulder. Hartman followed the fall of Alan Wake with his binoculars. When the rider hit the water, he ordered Jack to take the boat to him. The spot was easy to see in the dark, even with all the extra lights in the boat. The flare floated and kept burning even in the water. Jack turned the radio louder as the engine sputtered. The music was rough and clanking, something the Anderson brothers would no doubt have enjoyed. But Hartman chose to ignore it. Wake was finally within his reach. Hartman knew he was no creator. He had no ambitions on that front. And he certainly didn't want to end up like every artist he had worked with here, damaged in ways that were hard to describe, or worse. It was enough for Hartman to maintain creative control and provide direction, to be a producer. That was what most of these people were in need of anyway. Of course, suitable subjects were few and far in between. I stared at the Viking paraphernalia that littered the area, surrounding an unlikely centerpiece. A full-size stage complete with an impressive sound system with all the trimmings, including a dragon. It took a special kind of crazy to build something like this in a remote field. When the sky split open with a deafening boom and the music started blasting, it felt strangely appropriate. For the moment, Barry was just glad he had survived the fall. He had been separated from Al, and there was no easy way to climb back up. He told himself he'd be okay in the gloomy forest at night. He would just have to wait for a while for Al to find his way down. Barry turned when he heard the heavy footsteps and saw the movement. The man-shaped shadow lunged at him from the bushes, an axe held high. Barry screamed and threw up his hand. The world exploded. Hartman wasn't happy. Maude could see it in his eyes. He quickly lowered his own. He had made a mess of it, and he knew it. The shame of failure was hard to bear. He hadn't expected Wake to say he needed more time, and he blurted out 2 days, less than Wake had asked for to show him who was in charge. But that wasn't part of Hartman's plan. Agent Nightingale stared at the passed-out rider. The man was sleeping off one hell of a night. Nightingale felt a stab of envy at Wake's oblivion, but he had a job to do. He put the gun to Wake's head and almost became a murderer. His hand shook and his throat felt tight and dry. Biting his teeth, he tried again to pull the trigger. He lost the nerve. Wake stirred. Nightingale would have to settle for an arrest. The storm raged on as the Anderson brothers walked unsteadily away from the clinic with the other patients in tow, knowing that this time they wouldn't return. The darkness around them seethed with horrors, but Tor and Odin were unafraid. Their eyes glinted with guile. They knew every secret path, and there was blood on their hands. They had fought these shades before. The dark presence followed the choreography laid out to it in the manuscript, growing stronger and stronger, moving like a storm from one scene of destruction to the next. But it was still bound to follow the story and chained to the dark place it came from. When the story reached the end it longed for, it would finally be free. It's 1976. Madness reigns at the Anderson farm. Contrary to all logic, the headiest ingredient of their moonshine is unfiltered water from Cauldron Lake. The Andersons feel like gods. Odin can't stop laughing. He contemplates cutting his eye out. Tor runs across the field, naked, shrieking, hammer in his hand, trying to catch lightning. Their songs have power. Something ancient is stirring in the depths, coming back. Again, Alice's screams rang in the stillness of the night. I saw myself run toward the cabin, flashlight in my hand. I followed my past self. I was an out-of-body observer, a time traveler in a crazy drunken dream. This was the beginning. The night Alice had disappeared. The mystery of what had happened during the missing week was about to reveal itself. When he stopped the car at the Anderson farm, Walter felt relieved. Oblivion was close at hand. The brothers wouldn't miss a jar of moonshine or two in the booby hatch. But then he saw the man on the porch, and he knew who it was. Driving for his life and knowing it was useless, he didn't realize he was crying until he couldn't see the road for the tears.
With what happened to Dr. Hartman in this episode, he gets kind of he gets a little more kind of explanation for his character. Like, there might be a specific reason why he works with the artist. It could be the tip of that gigantic ice cube. I think the idea of him being a sort of producer, sort of a vicarious, he projects himself onto his clients slash patients, where I think that's kind of disgusting, but also good for a villain character to have. Probably one of the best things about the game so far is the Anderson brothers. They're really neat. And they seem to have been dealing with the darkness and all these terrible things for a very long time, possibly like 30 plus years. They were the rockers that get referred to in a couple other manuscripts before, or at least this one. And I really like the idea that when they broke out of the Cauldron Lake Lodge, that everyone behind them was just like, yeah, yeah, yeah. They just like held up the banner and said, "Follow us, guys!" And then I think that'd be pretty neat, very neat and cool. The other Hartman patients, I think it's something, okay, for everyone else in that clinic, I think it's very possible that they might also have stuff to do with the darkness. I'm not sure about that yet. I don't think I found that out. No. Okay. And then, like Hartman, we have Agent Nightingale, who gets a ton of time in these manuscript pages. And it's definitely, it seems like he's cognitively going after Alan. It's not just something that he can't control. It's something that he learned about him somehow. I think somebody gave him orders from the looks of it, since he's an FBI agent, to go after Alan. And then that's pretty much that we had to figure that kind of stuff out. A few names in the manuscripts. Emil is a name that I haven't heard yet, or I haven't seen yet, but it seemed to be someone that with Thomas Zane. Walter is the guy that was upstairs in that one country house before the farmhouse. And then Danny's the guy, his friend that killed him. And Walter was on one of those radios, I think in episode 3, maybe 2. I think probably 3. And he was saying how he doesn't really recognize Danny anymore. Just 2 radios in episode 4. But and then one of them I think is pretty important. And the other one is more subtly important.
Now, Mrs. Wake, can you tell me about Alan's problems?
He's more and more out of control all the time. The parties, he's so angry all the time. He's getting violent.
Do you mean with you?
No, not with me. No, never. Sometimes I almost wish Alan would take a swing at me, because at least that'd lead to a conversation he couldn't just march out of. But no. Alan doesn't really sleep. And the work, well, he's not writing at all. He sits there for hours and just gets more and more frustrated. And I can't talk to him.
Yes, tell me, Mrs. Wake. What would you say to him if he'd listen?
I don't know. I want to say, I look at you, and it's not you. Just some stranger who resembles you. Looking out from behind your eyes, and I don't like that guy much. And now it's all gonna go to hell.
But you don't ever say this.
No. I've tried, but he's not listening. He's too deep in his own problems, always going on about something else. I'm so afraid I'm gonna lose him, and we're not even talking anymore. He doesn't let me in anymore. He just keeps me in the dark. I'm so alone here, even when he's home. Please help me, Doctor, because I'm at my wit's end.
Well, if you can just get him here, I'll absolutely do my very best.
Yeah, but Doctor, you need to be careful with him. He's not just going to listen to you and cooperate. He's the most stubborn man I've ever met.
Well, I'll be sure to bear that in mind.
As you regular listeners know, I tend to work through the night, but I'm not the only one. Deputies Mulligan and Thornton are taking a couple of moments off their busy schedule to join me here in the studio. Boys, how busy are you now? Deerfest is almost here, isn't it? I bet that keeps you in business.
Pretty busy, yeah. Actually, Pat, we've been real busy with other stuff, which concerns an ongoing investigation. So we can't talk about that, Thornton.
I wasn't going to say anything. I was just saying we got, other irons to fry.
And how would you compare your workload to last year's? Things have seemed relatively peaceful to me, but people do tend to get a little wild this time of year.
Oh, it's wild, Pat. It's pretty wild. There's been all sorts of trouble this year. Vandalism, fighting, public disturbances. A lot of people gone missing, too.
Yeah, it's pretty much the usual stuff, Pat. Just, a lot more of it.
Now, is it just me, or does Deerfest get wilder every year? People seem to be more drunk, at least, or they start earlier and younger.
Oh, it's definitely not just you, Pat, but...
Definitely, Pat.
Hey, I'm talking here, Thornton. Oh, shoot, I lost my train of thought.
Not just me.
Oh, yeah, it's wilder, Pat, but actually most of the trouble seems to be coming from grown men. People who ought to know better, you know? Kids are doing fine this year.
Well, that's nice to hear at least. Boys, I want to thank you for stopping by. I'll let you get back to your patrol.
Sure thing, Pat.
Yeah, sure thing, Pat.
And in Bright Falls, it seems like every year before Deerfest, they have people start to go to parties and stuff like that. When parties get involved, things get broken. We have maybe some things get knocked over in the middle of town. Maybe stuff gets vandalized. Etc. etc. But the cops are kind of picking up on it. It's probably not unheard of for something like that, but with the darkness is also in town at this time in Bright Falls in the game in Alan Wake, and then so it's just a matter of how much are they going to recognize that. Alan and Alice's relationship, it's only really been brought up a few times here and there, but it's given way more details with right there, like the fact that Alice sent him to Dr. Hartman because they felt they just weren't talking. Other kind of bad stuff that Alan was doing, not necessarily to her, like she says, but it's just as bad to not have someone hear somebody of what just have to guess what they're going through and that kind of stuff, especially if they're married. I would say episode 4 is very rightly timed. But it's nice to have an episode in this game that got me actually anticipating playing again. It's the first one that did that.